Hey, welcome, folks. This is Charlie with Contemplating the Cosmos. And of course, we're going to get into some deep philosophical, deep scientific, and deep just about everything. This is going to be a topic that I think is pretty popular on my channel as far as the debate aspect of the globe versus flat. And I don't even want to say the whole thing because there's certain things that are shadow banned and I have to be mindful of the things I say on my channel. So anyways, but I have a special guest. So I had Kyle Adams on my stream, I think last week. And I guess Night Sky Jeff was, I don't know if he came with Kyle over to my channel or what the situation was, but he wanted to reach out to me so we could have a discussion. And honestly, I was much more open to it than I guess most people would be coming from my perspective. Again, I don't want to masquerade like I know anything, but I definitely am willing to, face truth for what it is, and we're willing to unpack the details and compare and contrast. So with that said, I have Jeff over here, and he's coming from New Jersey. He's going to stay up late to, talk to us about his perspective. And I want to actually give him the floor a little bit so that he can kind of describe his position a little bit, and we'll kind of unpack things from there. So go ahead, Jeff.
All right. Thank you very much, Charlie. The way I found out about your channel is Kyle had posted a link to your interview with him on his, and I have a bit of a history with Kyle, so I decided I would reach out to you and see if you were interested in having somebody with an opposing viewpoint to Kyle's come on your show. The name I go by on YouTube is Night Sky Jeff. My name is Jeffrey Pinion. I'm an amateur astronomer from New Jersey. I'm a software developer by trade, but I've been interested in astronomy off and on throughout my life. I really got back into it in 2017 because of the total solar eclipse that was happening in the United States. I drove down to South Carolina to see totality, and it was amazing. It was probably the most amazing thing I had seen in my life up to that point. I'm a father of a 2-year-old now, so the total solar eclipse has had to take a backseat to some things.
Yeah.
But shortly after seeing the total solar eclipse, I joined a local astronomy club. I bought a bigger telescope than I had previously had. And my role within the astronomy club that I belong to is I'm on the education and outreach team, which means, among other things, that I help make telescopes accessible to people who are interested in the night sky. I also do things that I call constellation walks, which is where, without the aid of a telescope, I will show people the night sky and help navigate it for them, showing them things like the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper, and then moving out from those two relatively common constellations, identifying other things in the night sky. It was in 2017, in preparing for the total solar eclipse, that I found out that there was a modern flat Earth movement. And I've been more or less paying attention to it since the summer of 2017. I've taken some sabbaticals, some hiatuses from it, simply because at some points it really just becomes a shouting match, and there's a lot of very negative emotion, negative behavior on all sides. But from what I've seen of your channel, you are a level-headed, polite individual, and I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, because I feel the same. For anybody that's open-minded to a discussion, I hope that anybody that's willing to have that conversation is level-headed as well. And I just want to say real quick hi to the chat. We got William here. We got Becky. And we got Katie. She says the Earth is roundish, galaxy flattish. And then I don't know. Anyways, Earth is brown. It's kind of brown over here. It's wintertime, so a lot of things are kind of dead and cold. So, but anyways, just to kind of break into the conversation a little bit, I actually I feel like this is going to be a kind of interesting conversation for people. There's a lot of people that aren't willing to even look at it because they're just like, I've kind of been taught most of my life that anybody that even talks about flat Earth or any kind of discussion like that is just dabbling in things that are just a waste of time. It's just foolishness. Like, why would I even want to dabble into something like that? Now, I'll tell you right now, I've been looking into this since 2015, and I was very close-minded to it in the beginning, like most, F ears, you might say, are. And so I actually, I started getting into the conversation a lot with people, even this channel. I mean, my first series of videos was called Flat Earth Philosophy. And Flat Earth Philosophy was really just me trying to say that however you desire to interpret the information is how you're gonna the outcome of the evidence, right? So in some ways, I was that guy that was in the discussion with creation versus evolution. Now I kind of question whether you're approaching it from, and forgive me for just assuming most of the people that seem, I don't know, very predominantly globe, pushing, I guess you could say, oftentimes, gravitate towards science mainstream in general. And oftentimes that stems from like an atheistic perspective. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know what your religious perspective is. Maybe that's irrelevant. But for me, when it comes to anything, when you're interpreting information, you're going to view it through the lens of, interpretation. So for me, I was raised as a Christian. I'm around a lot of religious people all the time. Maybe that's my, my blinders, you might say. So, so I'm just going to say right now, if there's a way to, just remove all those biases, I'm encouraging you to do the same. Let's talk about things as unbiased as possible, because when we start looking at things through a lens, that becomes kind of like a way that you actually interpret the data, and you end up, so you kind of get that perspective, I would imagine. And for me, so for the longest time, I said I'm 70-30. So since 2015, maybe December, or, the winter of 2015, sorry, the winter of 2015, I actually, I would say I was like thrusting myself into the midst of it. Like I just didn't know if I could believe the globe anymore, because of NASA, because of things that a lot of people gravitate toward as proof of the globe, and pictures are all CGI, or they're paintings or whatever, and so it becomes that conversation that I wanted to get down to the bottom of it for my sake and for the sake of people who are idiots enough to even consider it. You know what I'm saying? So anyways, so let's just start in a topic that that you feel is kind of the thing that you consider, the nail in the coffin, so to speak, for putting the flat earth to rest.
Okay. I'll preface it with two statements. The first of which is, I was brought up and still am a Christian. And the second remark is that what I'm going to say has to do with the moon. And I have heard before, and I just want to make you and your audience aware, I'm familiar with the common response of looking at the lights in the sky doesn't tell you anything about the ground you're standing on. And I firmly disagree with that mindset, for the reason being, the way we observe the lights in the sky tells us about the surface we're standing on. We would observe the lights in the sky differently if the ground were flat than if it were curved. With those two things being said, I guess one thing that I would call the nail in the coffin has to do with observations of the moon that we can make regardless of what the shape of the Earth is. Even treating the Earth as if it were flat, you can make observations of the moon that point to the moon being approximately 250,000 miles away from what we're assuming would be a flat Earth. And with that distance of the moon from the Earth, you then have to reconcile how an object which is always above the Earth could ever appear to be near or below your horizon, your eye level. It would require a lot of refraction. Furthermore, it would require a specially designed atmosphere or enclosure such that for all observers along a certain part of the Earth, the moon appears to be at the horizon. And for all observers a certain distance away from that, all of those observers see the moon at a particular altitude above the horizon, and so on. It comes down to it really comes down to there has to be a very particular type of refraction happening in the atmosphere or in some enclosure. And I have never seen a flat Earth model that actually attempts to define that refraction. I'm sure you have seen images of like the Gleason projection of flat Earth with a glass hemisphere over a glass half dome, and somebody shining a pen light into that glass, and you see these light and shadow patterns on the flat Earth. And people will say, see, we can get the correct light, daytime and nighttime patterns on the Earth. That's great. But what they don't do is they don't look at the angle that light is coming from the perspective of somebody on the surface. And if you actually do a ray tracing diagram of the way the light is coming in, you don't get the proper angles to the sun. You get, in certain conditions, you can get it such that nobody's actually able to see the sun directly above them. But we know that between the two tropics, there is a place where the sun appears directly above you. So a flat Earth model that includes the sort of refraction necessary for the sun to appear to go below the horizon also has to support the sun and the moon appearing overhead. So I've already diverged quite a bit from my original statement, which was that we can make observations of the moon that don't assume anything about the shape of the Earth. And those observations of the moon place the moon nearly 250,000 miles away.
Okay. So and again, I haven't done any tests for myself as far as like a parallax kind of understanding.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So like I've not, so my observations, and I made a video about kind of how the sun and the moon hit the horizon and then go behind. Now, I've actually, so I know you're familiar with David Weiss, because I saw a video that you were doing that basically was a debunk video, you might say. And now he had this drone that was like, I don't know, something like, I don't know, 500 feet in the air. I'm not sure how high it was, but he saw that the sun actually was going away and shrinking. Now, granted, I'm starting to think that light, as it's going away from you, the lens of the camera is not able to actually view the actual shape of the sun, but it's just kind of the light's dissipating as it's going behind more clouds and atmosphere and things like that. But it appeared to be shrinking on the horizon, and it kind of just sat on the horizon level. It didn't really go under the horizon, and then it eventually vanished behind what he called the cloud deck of opacity. And so now, as far as refraction is concerned, oftentimes, like you could say, cold, hot may determine whether refraction dips down or up. And I've seen where, it's inconsistent. Like I don't really know how anybody can use refraction as a way to prove anything, because now for anything that you observe from the sky, that was the thing that was the most difficult for me, because I'll sit there and I'll watch the moon go from the horizon in the morning, or maybe it'd be late afternoon to evening. You'll see it start over here and then it end up like overhead, and then it flips around, like how it turns as it's and I observed that with a video that I did, and I'm trying to understand, why is the moon rolling, right? Because it seems like if that's the case, it might bring credence to the Earth turning. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that that's proof of the Earth turning. It goes to show that the moon is turning around from our vantage point. Now, but I've never, as far as the vanishing point or the horizon, you might say. Let me just, sorry if I'm getting off topic myself, but I got to explain my understanding of refraction real quick, because I don't know if you ever noticed, but when you're observing from a long distance, you can kind of see, like, say the P900 or the P1000, you can see like way out there, like 15, 20 miles out, and people would often attribute that to it refracting and going with the shape of the Earth or whatever. But I started looking at like images of like a city skyline or something. You could see like windows of the building where the bottom portion of the building is compacted, so you can see it's like you can actually still see the building, but it's compacted at the lower section of the building, so it's not being blocked by curvature, it's just being compacted. And the only reason I would think that that's possible is the atmospheric density, that it's more dense as you're getting closer to the Earth. So up high you have a lot less density, so that's why you could see a lot more of from the higher, it doesn't look as compacted, you might say. So I just think that when people are arguing refraction and things like that, that's one of those situations where people are often interpreting to appease their belief, you might say. And I'm trying to view that from outside both positions and try to see how. I don't think refraction proves anything, because like I have a video where I put out talking about I was doing a little research, and I went back and looked at some of my videos, and I was like, you can see the lights of Milwaukee from Muskegon at sea level, or at the lake level, over Lake Michigan, on certain conditions. So 83 miles, I think, is like 4,000 feet of curvature, so give or take. So according to the curvature calculation. And again, I don't really know all the ins and outs of the curvature calculator. All I know is I plugged in the distance from Muskegon, Michigan, to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and it was 80 miles plus or minus. So for you to be able to see lights over that far of a distance seems unlikely to me. But maybe refraction does bring lights into view 4,000 feet with do you think it's possible that refraction brings light into view like that?
Yeah, I do. I wish I had prepared a YouTube video. I should have emailed this to you ahead of time. I'll send it to you after our conversation, or probably tomorrow morning, because if we're going as late as I think we are, I'm not going to stay up after this ends. Yeah. So first of all, I will say two things. Yes, it is completely plausible for refraction to bring light 4,000 feet or whatever it is up from where it should be. And the reason is, while 4,000 feet might sound like a lot, that's not the number that really concerns me. What concerns me is, you said your target was something like 80 miles away. And if you think of the Earth as a sphere about 25,000 miles in circumference, 80 miles, let's do 360 times 80 over 24,901. That is 1.15 degrees. So over a distance of 80 miles, you have moved 1.15 degrees away from your starting location, which means all that the refraction has to do is bend the light less than 1.25 degrees. And we know that refraction can do that because, for example, there's the Skunk Bay time-lapse footage where
so you're
there's
familiar
this
with
day-long video of things, compressing and stretching and moving up and moving down. And clearly that's refraction. And clearly it's showing refraction making light appear to move several minutes, even at least a degree of arc. So my answer is yes, refraction can cause light to bend 1.15 degrees, especially over a distance of 80 miles.
Sorry, I want to unpack this a little bit, because the Skunk Bay one, for me, if you didn't have the presupposed, there being a curve, you might actually be able to argue that the most natural starting point would be that you could see further, and then the refraction is what happens when things start heating up and you start losing view of what's further out, because of atmospheric conditions are being heightened due to the fluctuation in temperature. So for me, I think the natural ability to see further would be because of the lack of atmospheric conditions. So obviously there's going to be atmospheric conditions no matter what. So I mean, there's always going to be some sort of distortion at some point. You're not going to be able to see past a certain point. But usually the further that you are able to see is when there's less things to compete with. It's like, the density in the air, like clouds or any kind of moisture in the air. So I don't know. That's my interpretation of it based on, whatever. Go ahead.
Now, and you said something like that before, and I want to respond to that, which is the very fact that near the surface of the Earth is where the atmosphere is densest, and thus where refractive effects might be exaggerated or enhanced. That very fact is sort of an argument against doing all of these laser demonstrations at 3 inches above sea level and 1 foot above sea level, because, as you've just said, that's where the atmosphere is the thickest. So that's where we're going to expect the greatest refractive effects. By doing tests so close to the surface of water, you introduce the problem of a temperature, a density inversion, because the air right above the water might be slightly warmer.
It's evaporating.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you do these long distance experiments so close to sea level, you're hurting yourself because you're looking through the densest atmosphere, and so you're going to be dealing with the most refractive conditions. The other thing I wanted to say is, if we're talking about light bending 1.15 degrees over 80 miles, then that means the light only needs to bend 0.014 degrees every mile. 0.014 degrees is what? It's not even 1 minute of arc. So yeah, I'll just conclude that thought by saying it's entirely conceivable for refraction to bend light 1.15 degrees over 80 miles, because it's really such a small amount of refraction every mile. So that's my take on the whole refraction thing.
Yeah, and forgive me for not being so keen to the concept of like the geometry or the trigonometry aspect of it, or the degrees, whatever. I mean, honestly, I'm just using my eyes, you might say. I am slightly educated, not really educated. I feel like I'm smart enough to figure things out. Ultimately, I think I'm smarter than the average bear, so to speak. And I'm willing to. I think that there was a progression. You gotta understand this position here a little bit. From coming from my view, it started with noticing trends. And are you familiar with the that proverbial stairs of ascension? Each step that you take, reveals another level of understanding, you might say. And so for me, I remember I followed this guy Rob Skiba, who just recently passed away due to COVID, and now he was a guy that I followed, very in depth. Just about every video he put out, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go watch this. I'm gonna sit down and grab my popcorn or whatever. And so I ended up just listening to everything he had to say, because I felt like I was very impressed with his thought process. And so, anyways, it wasn't until I followed him since like 2013 maybe, and then he started looking into the flat Earth when you know he was listening to a podcast, and they had a Mark Sargent on, which is, I don't know, you're probably familiar with Mark Sargent.
Yes.
Well, anyways, so when Rob Skiba started looking into it, I was like, I gotta take, back off a little bit from Rob Skiba, because I'm like, I don't know if I can venture down this road. It just doesn't seem intelligent. So anyways, but I kind of, from a bird's eye view, I kept kind of checking back and kind of seeing where things were heading. And back when YouTube actually allowed the algorithm to feed you videos based on your interest, you might say. And I was looking into that for a minute, and it just kept feeding me videos. And so I decided I was going to look into the flat Earth clues, and I was scratching my head. But I felt like I don't know. There's too many variables, too many things to consider, and does anyone really even know? But I felt like I was asking myself the question, if I was to ever look into the flat Earth, I would have to debunk the moon landing first. So, as far as that is concerned, I started looking into NASA and trying to understand how people could actually debunk NASA, or debunk, the Apollo missions and things like that. So that's when I started feeling like that's what fueled my fire, because I actually feel like that was the next step in the proverbial stairs of ascension. I felt like that got me to the next level, so that I could consider the other options. I feel like a lot of people that are, quick to debunk the position have not ascended on the stairs, so to speak, because they didn't see where the stairs actually led. And it started with conspiracy. I mean, obviously, it has to be conspiracy, right? It has to be somebody, shutting down the narrative and making it to where you can't research the information. I mean, that's what's happening now, and that's another thing that bugs me because, like, I literally am worried that my video is going to get shadow banned because I can't discuss this openly without the bots, taking my video down or whatever.
Mhm.
And it happens all the time. I've had like 20 videos deleted by YouTube. I've gotten several strikes. So, and it's because I'm willing to, venture into these discussions. And why? Why is there suppression? Anyways, but go ahead. I just took a rabbit trail. Sorry about that.
I would say one thing that you just said that I strongly disagree with is it is entirely possible for the Apollo moon landings to have been faked and for 9/11 to be an inside job and for COVID to be a hoax, and yet the Earth actually be a sphere.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the shape of the Earth is one issue. I'm actually, I don't intend at all to speak tonight about whether the Earth rotates or whether it moves. Everything that I'm going to say tonight could be coming out of a geocentrist sphere Earth person's mouth. I do not associate the shape of the Earth with any other hot button topic. NASA could be a complete fraud. That doesn't actually change the shape of the Earth.
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, what you end up doing is instead of attempting to settle on the shape of the Earth, you place the blame on an organization that you decide you don't trust, and then you assume that everything that organization has told you is false, rather than testing the individual claims that organization makes. It's completely possible for NASA to lie about 99% of the things they say, and yet say 1% of the time they tell you something true. And you have to accept that 1% that they told you is true. If they tell you that, if NASA tells you that water is H2O, you can either say, well, NASA lies, so water is not H2O, or you can do the chemistry and find out, okay, yeah, water really is 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. So, okay, NASA, you're right this one time. And I said this in one of my emails to you. One of the problems I see in the FE community is in deciding to rebel against some authorities like NASA. They simply accept another authority. They will accept the claims of Mark Sargent or of Rob Skiba or of Jeranism and Globusters. They will accept their arguments without then doing the research themselves. There's a lot of research FE, but for a lot of people in the FE community that I've encountered, all that really means is parrot somebody else's research and not actually do the research yourself. That's one of the things that really disappoints me about this community. I end up having discussions with people who just point me to somebody else's work. They don't have anything original to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to be original. I mean, you have, that's what happened with, like the heliocentric view. I mean, you had, all the globe people early on that were, you kind of ride on whatever they're propagating, you might say, and you build onto that. It's like you're like why can't I think of anybody's name? Like like Galileo or Copernicus. And yeah, so oftentimes they're making reference to what they're saying, and then they'll also say, oh, these guys were revolutionary, they broke the mold, and they risked their life because all those crazy flat earthers were going to kill them or whatever, stone them, or put them on the chopping block or whatever. And
in the cases of Copernicus and Galileo, it wasn't a non-globe Earth contingent that was angry with them. It was a geocentric contingent that was greatly
Yeah.
surprised by the things that they were claiming.
Yeah, I mean, it might take your eyes off of God, so to speak. I mean, that's kind of a lot of what people's fear was to, go into a mindset of, wait, this could be a random, universe or whatever, and that's, I don't know.
I mean, I've heard that refrain a lot. I mean, I've heard the claim like they're telling you it's a globe to hide God. And
Mm.
I've heard things like, either they make this very strong dichotomy. Either God created a flat earth with a dome over it, and you are the center of the universe because you are special to God. Either that, or the earth is a globe that was created by a big bang 14 point whatever billion years ago, and you're just on a tiny pebble floating through space and there is no God. Now, I think
Yeah.
that's a terrible dichotomy. As a Christian, as a believer in God, I think the possibility that God created an immense universe and yet he pays attention to this tiny pebble floating around a 5 billion-year-old sun. Like, I'm greatly encouraged by God's love for me, knowing that I am one soul of billions upon billions. Like, I don't feel like God is being hidden from me or um, is being diminished in any way by believing that he could create such an amazing, vast universe like this. I try
Yeah.
not to bring religion into the discussion when I have it with people, simply because I have my own conspiracy theory, which I'm almost afraid to share with you because it might offend you.
It would not. I don't care. Go ahead.
Okay, my one conspiracy theory is that a alarming number of persons who say they belong to the flat earth movement and also claim to be Christian are actually malevolent atheists who are using the flat earth movement and Christianity to make the Bible look bad, because they will say the Bible is a flat earth book. And in doing so, they make to, to the majority of the population who believes the earth is spherical, they're basically making an argument that the Bible is an untrustworthy source. And that greatly offends me as a Christian. I do Bible studies.
Yeah.
Like, I help Christians read and understand the Bible better. It really irritates me that there are probably people who are atheists who are using the flat earth movement to make the Bible and Christianity look bad. That's
Gosh,
my
I
conspiracy.
wouldn't be so surprised if anybody was. I mean, like some of the guys that I listen to say, yeah, like the Flat Earth Society is one of them that is projecting a bunch of BS, you might say, and they're trying to make people look stupid uh, that follow this thought process. And I mean, I don't know. I don't like to project anything because, to be honest with you, you know, all I know is what I can see. And if anybody, I don't know somebody's intentions. In fact, I have this discussion with people here and there all the time where they're saying, "Oh, well, this guy's a troll or this guy's a shill." They're only doing it for the money, or I don't know. It's like I don't make a penny having any of these discussions. I mean, well, that's not true. I just found a way to break into my old email where my monetization was tied up, but I actually just got my monetization turned back on. But I've never made a penny from YouTube doing this stuff, except for I've had not necessarily the flat Earth perspective. No one's ever supported me to promote the flat Earth. It's never been about that. It's been anyways. That's beside the point. So for me, like the thing that really got me early on was like the high altitude balloons, like the image that you see here.
Mhm.
Um, I did a comparison of a photo of the space station and the Hubble telescope, and how you actually see, the horizons are always a little more round when it's almost like when NASA does a picture, it always has to exacerbate the curve, you might say. But I actually, you know about the Red Bull jump, they do the same thing with a fisheye lens. You can see the, the curve. And then,
Right.
of course, Neil deGrasse Tyson actually
Tyson
says, well, no,
says
you can,
from up
yeah,
there, yes. And
yeah,
you see, that's another thing I tend to avoid doing. I'm not here to make or to defend other people's arguments, especially not the science influencers or whatever the term for them
mhm,
is. Like, I Neil deGrasse Tyson wasn't up that high, and
exactly,
like,
yeah.
yeah,
By the way, I appreciate your willingness to say that, I'm not looking to any like a high priest, so to speak, of my perspective. I mean, you have your own brain, you can figure things out, and
mhm.
I appreciate that about what you're saying. And if you actually know anything about my channel, I've been flying solo. I haven't really talked to. I mean, I did talk to like some of the mainstream flat earthers. I mean, I talked to Mark Sargent. I talked to David Weiss. I've talked to Paul in the Plane. So I've had them on my show because I'm trying to understand, trying to pick their brain, you might say. But I don't know if you knew, but I actually have been more involved in the near-death experience discussion because I'm spiritually minded. There's a lot, and I talk about Bigfoot. I talk about aliens and stuff like that. So it's like these are the type of things. So I'm contemplating everything. It doesn't matter what it is. It just if there's a question mark there, I'm going to probably turn over the stones. That are there to turn over. I want to just know for myself. I've had people comment on like my interviews, like, why don't you just let them speak for you and stop trying to put words in their mouth or stop trying to guide them in a certain direction. And I'm like, you know what? I'm doing this so I can understand things better. I'm not doing this for you. I want to understand. I'm trying to pick people's brains so that I can understand things. I'm contemplating the cosmos, and not necessarily. But I've always appreciated, hearing other people's discussions. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to start interviewing people, because, and I like hearing debates too. Like I don't know if you ever heard Kent Hovind. Have you ever heard his debates?
I have heard of him. Yes.
Yeah, so early on, I was like, dang, this guy owns people, but he's rude, and I just don't like his attitude, whatever. So, but I always like to hear the contrast because there's always more than one way to look at things, and so coming full circle, I mean that whole refraction thing, uh, you know, like Jay Tolan Media. Do you ever like pick apart his videos?
I haven't picked apart his videos. I do have a few of them bookmarked for use in future FE debunking videos.
Yeah. Are you thinking or? Oh,
No, like there was something that had to do with refraction and infrared. Oh,
yeah,
right.
that's what it is. Infrared.
Um, it's so I'm trying to remember the way I framed this argument. There's basically two ways that light can refract. If you have a ray of light that's going this way, okay? If the ray of light refracts downward, that means when it reaches your eye, you think the object giving off the light is higher than it really is. The light bends down into your eye and it reaches your eye at a steeper angle. So you think the thing is higher up. Or the light refracts upward. And when the light refracts upward, it meets your eye at a shallower angle. And so you perceive the thing to be lower than it actually is.
Hmm.
And so I think the issue I have with his videos is he's using infrared, which in the spectrum of light, infrared refracts less aggressively than red light does. And what that means is if we are seeing things like mountain peaks that should be crap. I have this somewhere on Kyle's board.
Yeah,
I wasn't really prepared to bring it up. But
I
basically,
know.
I
I
think
think I know what you're talking
I
about.
think the
Because
idea of my argument is basically like refraction works the wrong way for J. Tolan Media if he's claiming that infrared helps us see further.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, so one of the things that really caught my attention when he did the video about Mount San Jacinto, I actually used to live in San Jacinto, California, so I know exactly what mountain he's talking about. It was hovering over the town I lived in. Uh, but it's one of those peaks that goes from about maybe 300 or 400 or 500 foot elevation to bam, it's like 8,000 feet, like up in the air, right next to it. It just like, it goes straight up from where you're at, and so when you're in Santa Monica or wherever he was when he saw it was like 100 miles away, and obviously the infrared made it more clear looking, and now, but he pointed out the compression at the bottom of the mountain. So there was a guy that put out a video that was debunking the J. Tolan Media one, and I watched it and I was like, wow, he actually had the software that actually brought the mountain back up, and he actually factored in the curvature to his calculations in the software, and like half the mountain was missing. But the interesting thing to me is that you can detect the compressing effect of the lower side of the mountain. So anything that interacts with more density in the atmosphere, you're going to see a compression effect. Now, the thing that I'm going to ask you real quick is this right here. See, if you're this high up in the atmosphere, how much refraction is happening when you are up this high? Because it still appears to be kind of like eye level. So is it refracting upwards with in the lower density? You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to stick at you is you
Okay.
said it looks like it's at eye level. I can take a picture of anything and crop it so that whatever I want appears in the middle of the frame, and I can claim that is at eye level.
That's true.
So
That's true.
that's the first problem.
Okay.
In order to know that it's actually at eye level, you'd need to see the whole frame, and you'd need to know, is the camera straight or is it tilted down? That is, I do not trust anybody claiming something is at eye level until I'm given those two pieces of information.
I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
The second thing is I don't know what kind of lens is being used on this camera. I don't know if the picture behind you is a single image or if it's a panorama. And if it's a panorama, then that means it took one picture and then it's turning slightly and it's taking a single pixel or a few pixels at a time. And so, of course, you're going to see a straight image. A panorama is taken in such a way that you wouldn't have a curve, a curve, a curve like that. And you can test that for yourself by taking like 4 pictures of your room, individual pictures of your room turning, and then take a panorama picture and compare those two. And you'll see that the panorama picture displays things very differently than 4 individual pictures would.
Do you feel like this picture could be I mean, for me, I don't see any discrepancies in the picture. If it was a panorama, it was definitely Photoshop. So I don't know.
See, that's the thing. I don't know anything about the photo. I don't know where it's from. I don't know.
And I literally just pulled this off the internet, like just before this. So.
As to the main point of your question about the refraction, obviously, if we're as high as this image would make us think we are, like
121,000 feet is what they're saying.
Okay, 121,000 feet. There's virtually no refraction for you to worry about unless you start looking at things through that that blue haze just above what appears to be the horizon. Because when you're looking at that area, just that the bottom part of that blue haze just above the horizon, when you're looking at that, you are looking through the most possible atmosphere that you could. Kyle Adams shared a video on his board, and I could probably find it with a couple minutes on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's a video that claims to be from the ISS, and it's the ISS watching the moon set behind the horizon of Earth.
Hmm.
And the moon starts out looking circular, and then it suddenly starts to get squished and squished and squished and squished as it goes through that very, very thick part of atmosphere. And that corresponds exactly to what you're saying about you do see compression when you're looking through that very thick part of atmosphere. We see it from Earth's surface. If you look very carefully at sunrise and sunset, or moonrise and moonset, when you watch a full moon just as it's rising, you will see that it looks a little oblong, and that's
Yeah.
because in the globe model, looking at things right on the horizon, the light is refracted a little bit, and the light from the bottom of the moon is refracted just a little bit more than the light from the top of the moon. So the bottom of the moon appears just a little bit higher, so the moon looks squished.
Yeah, I'll send you a video I made probably like 3 or 4 years ago about that exact thing. It's the moon and the sun being compressed. You could see it, and that's actually my footage that I took with my video camera. So, anyways,
But then what you have to reconcile that with is the fact that we do actually see the moon not compress. We do actually see the moon go below the horizon. And you can see this with the sunset too. Like when you watch the sunset, yes, the sun starts to squish a little bit, but then that squished part goes, it doesn't compress anymore. It is blocked by your horizon, especially
so
if you're at the seashore.
I want to talk to you a little bit about something that I mentioned to Kyle, and that was the first person that propagated this information was Thoria Apophysis, which I don't know if you ever follow this guy, but
I've seen some of his videos.
Yeah, so he talks a lot about like the what do you call it? Never mind. But the point that I'm making about him is he says that light doesn't exist as we understand it. And again, I don't know, like it's all interpretation to me, potato kind of thing. And it's like, before we get into that, I want to actually bring up an image, and I'm sure you've seen this already as well. But I wanted to, it's oftentimes referred to as the black swan. And I'm sure you've seen the image before.
Yeah.
And I want to know what your thoughts and interpretation of it is. So hang on one second while I share my screen. Hang on a second. I didn't really set this up yet, so I have to quickly go over here. Bam. There it is, flat Earth. Okay, share. All right, you see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so I wish that I could. So you can see, like, say this image here. I don't know if you can see where my cursor is here, but
No,
off to the right.
The cursor's not showing up.
Oh, okay. But to the right, on the top right there, this is an image where you can see refraction or distortion or atmospheric conditions blocking, or you might even say the curvature. That might be the curvature blocking the oil tanker or whatever that's in the background. Yet the video, like, or not video, I'm trying to find a larger image of this. Here's a flurf, somebody mocking it. So what I was trying to point out is a lot of these guys are using this image as a some sort of proof that there is no curve. Now, because on one, I don't know if you can see to the right, the platform at 6.21 miles, and then to the left is 9.41 miles.
Yeah.
When it looks like it might be around the same level, and then you can even see the horizon or the water, cut off behind the one that's 9.4 miles away. So and obviously I've so Ben from Taboo Conspiracy. I don't know if you know that guy, but he I've followed him quite extensively, and I even met him in Utah like a month or two ago, and that's how I met Kyle. Actually, that's the reason I had him on. But hold on a second. Let me flip back here. So, anyways, like they often use that image as the nail in the coffin from the flat Earth perspective, right? So,
Yes.
why is there refraction sometimes? And I mean, we established that already. That why there's refraction sometimes and not other times. But what about that image? I mean, does it say anything to you? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so there's the two. Let's talk about the two black swan images. There's the one where the more distant platform, I think is what it's called, the more distant platform is obstructed from the bottom up by water. And that's like the I don't know if they would call that the control image. They would probably, the FE side would say, this is refraction causing the horizon to appear closer. Yeah. And then they would say this other image where we can see the bottoms of both of the platforms, this is the globe killer. Now, I'm not going to be the first person to point this out, but if you look at that black swan picture, if you look at the platform on the left, the one that's further away, you will see that there's this like diagonal beam coming out of it that, like, if I were actually to show you what it's doing with my arm, I'd have to break my arm in two places to show you what it's doing. You can see it's all the way at the very left of the photo. That beam is supposed to be coming out diagonally, and yet it squiggles up. It squiggles like that. That's demonstrating an awful lot of varying refraction. It's basically showing you that there's a horizontal part of that platform is being stretched up like this. And that's because the light from it is coming through a very unstable part of the atmosphere that causes the light to bend, to diverge quite a bit. If you look at the other photo where that platform is partially concealed by water, you'll see that diagonal beam, it doesn't have all those funny crooks in it. It just goes out like this. But in the black swan photo, it is bent 6 ways till Sunday, and it's an obvious indicator of excessive refraction, varying refraction. So, and this again is why I say taking these photos so close to the surface of the Earth is not a good test of anything.
Yeah, sometimes when I hear, and again, to me, it's hard for me to really look at any of these images and say that this is proof or disproven based on an image, because it goes back to interpretation sometimes. So say we are looking at the same evidence, quote unquote, yet coming to different conclusions. Now, how much am I leaving out of consideration? Like, here's another picture that I made a video about this too, where you get the reflection off the water, which creates the superior mirage, and so really the horizon is actually above the reflection. It would basically be at the bottom side of the boat, and it's blending together. But I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of this stuff. I think it's interesting. I almost feel like it's kind of beating a dead horse in some ways to try to say one person's right or another person's wrong in their interpretation. For me, and again, I'm just looking at these things and thinking, it makes sense to me to see this image here. I want to see a larger view of it. And I'm trying to find a, I don't like the way that this is set up because it doesn't give me, I was just thinking about this volcano too. I don't know how, for some reason, I feel like oftentimes people don't think about like the turn of the earth not shifting the direction of like where the wind's blowing or whatever. Sorry, I don't want to go into another topic here, but I'm going to flip back here just a second. Go ahead.
So since we both seem to be somewhat in agreement that when you look at these observations that are so close to the surface of the Earth, you're looking through the most atmosphere, so you're going to be dealing with the most refraction. It seems more sensible for us to make observations of things that are high overhead, near our zenith, if not directly overhead, at least very high up in the sky.
So the moon and the sun are examples of how you, I mean, again, for, you've heard the analogy, I'm sure, where you can't really know the shape of a pool table by looking at the balls. So
unless you are looking at the billiard balls while standing on the pool table and moving around, that will tell you the shape of the pool table. And that's exactly what we're doing when we do something like lunar parallax. Lunar parallax, an example would be, you're in Utah?
I was in Utah when I visited there, but I'm in Boise, Idaho.
Okay, so you're at least like 2,000 miles from me. Okay.
Yeah.
Not knowing what the shape of the Earth is.
Let's do an experiment, because that's quite a parallax. If you observe something from your perspective, I observe something from my perspective at the same time, we're going to see two different things, right?
Exactly. That is exactly it. You are, let's just say you're 2,000 miles away from me, and we don't know what the shape of the Earth is. But we both say that in 2 weeks, when it's like close to a full moon, at 1 a.m. for me, which is 11 p.m. for you, at the stroke of 1 and at the stroke of 11, we're going to go outside, we're going to face the moon, and we're going to take a big picture of the sky with the moon in it and hopefully some stars. If we do that at the same time and we compare our two pictures, I can guarantee you this: all of the stars that we see, assuming we have clear skies, of course, all the stars that we can see, when we lay our two images together, all those stars will be in exactly the same place in our pictures. The moon will not be. If you line up our two pictures, you can make it so all the stars line up. The moon will be out of place. And what we can do with our two pictures, knowing that we live 2,000 miles apart, we can figure out how far away the moon is because of parallax.
Okay, so this is reminding me of something you mentioned about the North Star or Polaris. How maps of the stars going way back hundreds or thousands of years or whatever, they've mapped the stars, and how there isn't the Polaris was basically in the same position all year, year round, or whatever.
That is the FE claim. The FE claim that I've seen in many videos and in many memes is that in all recorded history, Polaris has never moved. And my response to that is twofold. First of all, if you go out right now on a clear night and you take a telescope and you aim it at Polaris so that Polaris is right in the center of your eyepiece, and you look through that telescope for an hour, you will see Polaris move. The reason is because, contrary to the popular claim, Polaris is not directly aligned with the celestial pole. Polaris is about 2/3 of a degree off of the celestial pole, which means in the course of 12 hours of evening, Polaris will make a small semicircle in the sky, slightly larger than the moon appears to be.
Yeah, I've seen that in the star trails time lapse.
All really good star trail photos you'll never see a single dot in the center of them. You'll see a semicircle, and it's because Polaris is not perfectly lined up with the North Celestial Pole. So that's the first thing. Polaris moves every night. But the bigger claim is that Polaris, okay, it might make a small circle in the sky now. It's always made that circle for all recorded history. And again, that's not true. If you look at naval celestial navigation logs over the past decades, centuries, they have tables of the positions of hundreds of stars that are used for navigation. And if you look at those tables, you will see Polaris's position has changed. Over the past couple of centuries, Polaris has actually been getting closer and closer to being lined up with the North Celestial Pole. That means that when you go out at night to night, the circle that Polaris makes over the course of an evening is a smaller circle than it made 100 years ago, and a smaller circle than it made 200 years ago. I know.
How can you compare that? I mean, who has measured that before? That little circle or whatever.
The people who make the almanacs for celestial navigation at sea. You need to know how far away things are from a fixed point in the sky, and that fixed point in the sky is the North Celestial Pole. And again, I say that the North Celestial Pole is a fixed point in the sky because we're acting like the Earth doesn't rotate and that the Earth doesn't move through the galaxy or whatever. So if you treat the Earth as a stationary sphere, the North Celestial Pole never moves. Everything else seems to move around it. And over the past several hundred years, we have navigational guides that tell you Polaris is 1.25 degrees from the North Celestial Pole. Polaris is now 1 degree from the North Celestial Pole. Polaris is now 2/3 of a degree from the North Celestial Pole. And you need that information. You need that specific information to be able to navigate at sea properly. FE has this whole thing about sextants right now. If the FE people who were saying sextants only work on an FE, they don't work on a globe, if they actually looked at the naval celestial navigation logs from the past few centuries, they would see that Polaris has been moving. And then they'd have to regroup and reformulate their argument. It's one of the things that annoys me about so many FE memes I see. They'll say something like Polaris has never moved, and it's just so obviously false.
Yeah, I admit that there's a lot of, I don't think that there is, I think that it's the minority to be intelligent when it being in this movement. I think that there's a lot of people that are just jump on the bandwagon kind of people. And for me, I actually don't feel like I'm one that jumps on the bandwagon necessarily. I've always been the fringe of the fringe with a lot of the things I've discussed. I'm willing to look at it through another lens that the mainstream isn't willing to consider. Now, so like with this topic, I feel it's hard to use anything as an absolute proof. Now, you could say Bob Nodell from Globebusters, he says it's the preponderance of evidence that basically proves the Earth is flat and stationary. And oftentimes people kind of gravitate toward one proof, but it's not really a proof because it could be interpreted two different ways. And now, so like for me, like when I was looking at this high altitude balloon, I was like, oh my gosh, you can't even detect and you had actually said that how can you trust any like anything on the internet? You can't really, you don't know if it's credible. In other words, you don't know if it's a credible source. And my brother actually gives the same arguments. Like, who is credible? Is there anything credible? I mean, you have to figure all this stuff out on your own if you want to have anything credible. Now, I mean, a lot of people, always look back to like somebody that they rely upon when it comes to how you doing on time.
I'm fine. I just noticed this funny spot behind my head, and I think it's the roof of my office here, slightly buckling under the weight of the snow on top of it.
Are you serious?
But It's not a concern. Unless
Oh,
if during the course of this broadcast the ceiling does fall on me, please call 911 for me.
all right. Well, uh, I'll keep that in mind. All right. So, but yeah. So, and again, I remember when I don't know if I told you in the beginning, but I was always like 70-30 in favor of flat Earth. I never was willing to, jump ship because I felt like there's just too many things to consider, and I was always willing to venture outside of my box, whatever position it is. So, so, so I started making videos about the refraction and so like I don't know. My mind is racing. I just keep thinking of all these different um, points or these different things to discuss. But I was talking about Bob Nodell and the preponderance of evidence. So the thing that got me the most was NASA, because a lot of people do look to NASA and the images of the Earth, and sometimes you just have to, if you're trying to get down to the bottom of it, or you're trying to discuss with people out there, or even just show them like, wait, look at the anomalies in what NASA's presenting, like on the space station and stuff. You could see that they're like grabbing wires and dangling on whatever. There's a lot of different things that you can see. um, they use green screens and things like that. If I move
And so do a
around,
lot
you
of
can
people on
actually see it on
YouTube.
the. So this right here, you can see a tear in my green screen. And so, yes, so that begs the question, like, is there anything that's reliable as information to support your view without doing your, but that puts so much gray area on things. Like, it's so like, so you're talking about like stars and the parallax and things like that. That's the proof of the shape of the Earth.
I would
um
say I wouldn't use the word proof. I would say I have a lot of
Evidence.
evidence that points to the
Okay.
Earth being spherical, and that I've never actually seen a flat Earth model that can explain the things about the moon and star parallax. Like the amount of refraction necessary, um, the personal atmospheric dome that Globebusters that came up with a year or two ago to explain how we see Polaris, like, so to explain, one of the evidences that I use for the Earth being spherical is if you know your distance north of the equator, that means you know your latitude. And if you know your latitude in degrees, I'm at about 40 1/4 degree north latitude. That means when I go outside, if I face north, or if I face Polaris, I know I'm facing north. And if I look 40.25 degrees up from horizontal, I'll be looking at Polaris, plus or minus a little bit, because as I told you 15 minutes ago, Polaris is not perfectly lined up with the North Celestial Pole. But if I look 40 1/4 degrees, I'll be looking almost exactly at Polaris.
Mm-hmm.
You are in Boise, Idaho. If I do a real quick look up, Boise, Idaho latitude, Boise, Idaho's latitude is 43.6 degrees. So if you go out on a clear night and you face north and you look 43.6 degrees up from horizontal, you'll be looking at Polaris. Wherever you are in the northern hemisphere, except like maybe a degree or two, because refraction is very, very bad close by the horizon. If you're above like 5 degrees north latitude, whatever your latitude is how high above horizontal you need to look to see Polaris. All of that data is strongly in favor of a sphere. If the Earth is flat, you need to come up with this pattern of refraction such that somebody standing at the North Pole looks straight up and sees Polaris. Somebody standing at 45 degrees, they see Polaris at 45 degrees, but you need to make the light refract like this. And somebody standing at 30 degrees sees Polaris here, but the light actually has to refract like this. So you come up, your model for a flat Earth has to have that sort of refractive pattern, a refractive substance that
Well,
creates those paths of light.
nobody really knows the elevation of the stars or whatever on a flat Earth. I mean, they just guess. I
You don't
mean,
need to. See, but that's the beautiful thing. You can make a model that describes and accurately predicts a system. That model might not actually be reality, but if that model can accurately predict your reality, then you can use that model. So here's a crazy hypothetical. The world could actually be flat, but the globe model works so much that we can use the globe model, which is why I can say I go outside and I look 40.25 degrees above my horizon, and there's Polaris. The Earth is flat, but the globe model works so well that I can use it to make predictions. That's the crazy thing about a model. So flat earthers don't need to know how high the moon is.
yeah.
They don't need to know how high the stars are. They just have to create a model that says it's as if the stars were here, and it's as if we had this circus tent shaped inverted dome over us that causes refraction to work just right. But they don't do that. They
Maybe
are
that's what it is.
they are only
Maybe it
using
is a
they are
circus tent.
the problem is that there's no ancient cosmology that says we're covered by a circus tent. They say that we're covered by a dome.
I mean,
And that's the other
it
thing with
does say
ancient
that. Yeah.
cosmologies. That's the other thing with ancient cosmologies. Yes, okay, we have a lot of ancient cosmologies that say the earth is flat. What do those ancient cosmologies say the sun does when it sets? Do they say that the sun goes under the earth? Some of them do, because those ancient cosmologies were for a group of people that lived here. And as far as they knew, when the sun set, it went under the earth, and it came up again 12 hours later from the burning lands, and it set in the burning lands. The book of
Yeah.
Enoch says that the sun goes through portals. Well, you can go to a place and you can watch the sun for 24 hours and it won't set during the summer in the Arctic Circle. You never see the
Yeah.
sun go through a portal. Like,
Well, okay. So, I mean, it kind of made sense to me when I was thinking in terms of like, so say this is the sun right here, right? Its little rays coming down. I kind of, if again, I have no idea. It's 121,000 feet elevation from this perspective. So what is that, like less than 5 miles up, right? Uh, so it'd be 125,000 or approximately, right? If it was 5 miles.
100,
So,
wait.
anyways, the point is,
125,000
uh,
feet is like
would be
40 kilometers. That's like 25 miles or so.
wait, hold on. Hold on. What am I talking about? Like 5 times 5 is 25, right? So, and
Yeah,
there's about roughly 5,000 feet per mile. So,
yeah. Were you
that's
saying 25,000 feet or 125,000 feet?
125,
Okay, so
125,000.
that's okay. 125,000 feet is
And I'm just
23
rounding off
miles.
to like an even, yeah. So let's just say we're about 23 miles up at this perspective, right? So, and again, you don't know how high the sun is even still, just based on light projection. I've seen images of the sun, that came into the view of the camera, and you can kind of see it just kind of floating around or whatever. But like Jay Tolan Media actually tried to, you know, I think I hear an echo, Kels. My wife's actually listening to me. Are you serious? She's in okay. So, but Jay Tolan Media tried to show how far the sun was from him based on parallax. And did you ever see that video?
No, I have not.
Uh, Maybe I'll send you that one. I think some of the videos that I watch are pretty interesting, and obviously people always try to like prove something based on what what someone's video is proposing, and I hope I'm not getting a delay on my internet, so I apologize if I am. But anyways, but as far as like the sun, it seems to me like there's a certain vanishing point when once you go far enough out on the horizon that you know what, like Dave Weiss would say, the cloud deck of opacity will actually take it out of your view, and then eventually the light would dissipate to the point where you can't see the light anymore, based on the theory that was presented by Thoria Apophis. Now he doesn't believe in the flat Earth. He actually said it on a couple different videos that I watched, where he thinks it's nonsense. But he did say that light works like a Tesla coil, in the sense that anything that projects an energy field theory, right? Anything that interacts with a field. Are you still with me?
I'm sorry, you broke up a lot over the past 10,
me?
15 seconds. You've been breaking up over the past 30 seconds or so.
Oh, sorry. I'm getting some issues with my internet again.
You can go now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Well, I got some delays. I got delays going on, it seems like, so I apologize. It's like we're talking on the other side of the world now, because now you got to wait for me to catch up with what you're saying. I don't know. I would like to continue our conversation, but if we're having some delays or lags in the internet, I fear that it's going to cause some communication deficit. So are you still following? I'm trying to figure out how much lag there is.
You mentioned Theoria Apophis, but you broke up while you were talking about the way that fields interact.
Yeah, so the Tesla coil. You ever seen those videos where you have like a neon sign or or a fluorescent bulb or something? You bring the bulbs within range of that Tesla coil. You can see the light illuminate because you can see the excited particles within the bulb, based on whatever's interacting with the field. And now that concept of Tesla coil is interesting to me, because when you consider the sun a Tesla coil, and anything that interacts with the field, eventually you won't see the light anymore, because it's no longer interacting with the field. And again, this is just a theory, or something that I don't know how to prove, but I thought it was interesting, and I don't know if you ever looked into anything like that.
No, I have not.
Field theory, okay. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think you should look into it. I can try to guide you down the road of my investigation on that, and you can debunk it. You can poke holes in it, whatever you want to do. I'm interested in talking to you in greater detail about stuff like this. If you want to kind of hold my hand through the process of coming back to the globe, if you're interested in doing that, that's up to you. But I actually feel like there's enough alternative concepts to consider that I feel like, yes, there is not a solid flat Earth model. A lot of people bring that up. They have the Gleason's map. They have the whatever maps, the AE map, and there's different maps. But again, I consider this movement, quote unquote, to be about 6 years old. I mean, prior to this movement, there was just a bunch of radicals that just. I mean, I don't even know how they've been talking about flat Earth since like way back when, but it was just a very, very small minority prior to 2014-ish. So now that it's become a little more mainstream, uh, I still think it's just a young movement, and there isn't enough people out there that or they're not funded, they're not supported by science, they're not supported by the government to give funding to build a good model. That's kind of the way I look at it. And I don't know. Uh, I mean, would you be willing to admit that it's possible that, if you consider, viewing your, quote unquote evidence from the heavens as being the solid evidence that you have backing uh, the perspective of the globe, I still feel like, well, I guess I just don't have a good enough understanding of it to really, you know, say that I'm absolute about anything. I'm willing to just look at anything still. So, anyways, you're kind of. I feel like I'm dominating and I'm breaking up too much. Go ahead and. Am I still doing okay on? I'm not breaking up anymore, am I?
No, you've been quite good for the past few minutes.
Okay, good. All right. Well, anyways, so I wish that you had some insight on the field theory thing, but I think that like Dimension Dan or Dan Dimension, there's a YouTube channel where they're showing about a bunch of perspective of like the sun going away, and you could see how the light actually starts changing colors, like from like a yellowish color to an orangish to a purplish or peach color. You could see like how there's different, like the light spectrum actually changes as the light goes away, right? So you can see the light spectrum change. um, does that just mean that when the light goes through the atmosphere, you can see the light spectrum change? Because um, you know it's just weird to me that you can predict, based on certain conditions of the atmosphere, you can almost predict that you'll see, like say like when there's a lot of clouds in the sky, you're sure to see like pinks and purples, right? uh, when the
Right.
sun goes down.
Right.
And that's interesting. Those are I liked. You could see like how refraction affects the light, and it causes a spectrum of colors. But but it's only as the sunlight is dissipating.
Correct. And that's because when you are experiencing sunset on the globe model, when you are experiencing sunset, the light from the sun is going through lots more of the Earth's atmosphere than at noon. At noon, the light from the sun is going through as little atmosphere as possible to get to you. And so there's less opportunity for it to refract away from you. And as it refracts, the different wavelengths of light have slightly different tendencies to refract, which is why if you shine white light through a prism, like in the common picture of light going through a prism and breaking up into a spectrum, it breaks up into a spectrum because those wavelengths of light refract at just slightly different amounts. So when the sun is setting, the light from the sun is going through so much atmosphere and it's experiencing so much refraction that the wavelengths of the light start to split up. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you have clouds overhead, those clouds are acting as something to catch that light and reflect it to you, which is why when you have a cloudy sky during a sunset, you see those beautiful colors. When you have a clear sky at sunset, all you really see are these vague blending bands of color in the sky, and they're not nearly as vivid as when you have clouds to reflect the light to you. And that's why as the sun sets, you see it going from its blinding yellow to a much more soothing orange, and then to a deep red just as it goes below the horizon. Moonrise and moonset are also really good examples, because the moon, it doesn't blind us when we look at it. So, a full moon high in the sky looks very, very silvery white. But when you watch a full moon from the very moment it rises, if you have a telescope, you'll be able to see the full moon just as it comes up above the horizon. The full moon is deep red. And as it starts going up, the moon looks orangish and then yellowish. And then by the time it's about 10 to 15 degrees above your horizon, the moon basically looks the color it's going to look for the rest of the night, until it reaches the opposite horizon and starts to set. And then again, it goes through those colors. And the reason it goes through those colors is because the light from the moon, which in the globe model is just being reflected from the sun, it's reflecting the light from the sun. That light from the moon is going through a lot of atmosphere, and that atmosphere is causing it to refract and causes certain wavelengths of light to refract away from your eye so you don't see them. And it's instead the colors at the red end of the spectrum that stick around, that are able to refract to your eyes.
Yeah. I mean, this thought process is interesting to me. I like the science aspect of this, and I just love. I mean, so like, it's weird to me that a lot of people get offended that the Earth is interpreted as flat. Now, or even vice versa. Like, I kind of glance over the chat, and it seems like I try to ignore the chat sometimes, because this is kind of a controversial topic, and I don't want to pay attention to people that might be saying like, oh well, my perspective's right and you're an idiot, kind of thing. It happens all the time, whether you're a glober or a flatter. So I don't feel. I wish that this kind of discussion, like you and me, was put out there and was favored by the algorithm of YouTube, because I'm willing to actually look at things. You're kind of looking frozen. I'm wondering if I'm frozen.
No.
Okay, good. I see, and I get little comments like this. This is a bot like trying to monitor my video. It seems like, but I've gotten several of those already, because I think that they send bots over to all the channels, probably, or even more so to the channels like mine. I don't think YouTube favors the algorithm for me at all, because even though I have like almost 4,000 subscribers, sometimes I'm lucky to get like 80 views on a video. It's like, are you kidding me? And so anyways, that's another conspiracy thing about like my understanding of things, is I feel like they're suppressing information, and it bugs me. They're suppressing it from the perspective, from the top down, and I don't know why they don't just let us sort these kind of things out. Granted, there are a lot of people that are just putting out, bad information. I'm not saying that that's not true, but I think that, I'm glad that. By the way, I'm happy that you came on, because we're barely scraping the surface, or we're not able to get too deep into too many topics. And I mean, I would always be willing to discuss in greater depth with you. I'm almost willing to, how confident do you feel that you could prove the globe from your perspective?
I'm not going to say prove. All I can say is that I can produce lots of evidence that works like a charm on a globe model and requires a lot of explaining away on a flat model. And the majority of the evidence I can think of that flat earthers would use is explainable on the globe model with things like refraction, or a lot of the criticisms that the flat Earth has of the globe or heliocentric models um, are representations, are examples of how they don't actually understand the model. So, for
Yeah.
example, somebody saying, "Oh, who I heard this just the other day." There's like a flat Earth kids show that somebody was. Oh, Globebusters mentioned it. There's a skit
Oh.
on Flat Earth Kids that says, "Hey, boys and girls, go outside and look up in the sky, and you'll see the constellation Orion. You can see the constellation Orion every night of the year," and that's 100% of a lie. It's a claim that they made with no evidence. And I'd love it if you, on June 21st, for example, could go out at night with your camera and take a picture of Orion for me. And you won't be able to, because the sun is going to be just above the constellation Orion, which means Orion's going to be up only during the day when the sun is out. Um, the like the flat earther remarks about how we see the same stars every night. It's simply wrong, and it's born out of bad observation. Um, and the claim that, like, if the Earth is going around the sun and the sun is going around the center of the galaxy at this speed, and this galaxy is moving at whatever speed, then why don't all the stars go brr, 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 brr?
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that argument.
Again, that's a blatant misunderstanding of the standard model of the galaxy. The stars that we see in our sky are the stars within our own galaxy, and more or less, those stars are moving at the same angular speed around the center of the galaxy as we are. Not exactly the same speed, but close enough. And they're so incredibly distant from us that you're not going to see them moving. Stellar parallax can only be detected with very, very precise instruments. There's no way you're ever going to see stellar parallax with your own eyes. So yeah, I would say that I have plenty of evidence that supports a globe model, and that requires, for Mojo Shop, it requires a lot of refraction for the flat Earth model to explain. And I've never found flat Earth evidence that can't be explained by the globe model or the heliocentric model.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of getting into my mind. I've always liked hearing, um, David Weiss have discussions, and he's always looking for somebody that is a globe, uh, supporter, so that he can have a discussion with them. And all the globe supporters that I've listened to that he's talked to don't really have uh, anything other than belief to support their perspective. And like for you to be approaching it from a amateur you know astronomer, or is that what you call it?
Yeah, amateur astronomer.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not. I mean, it's a hobby. I'm assuming, but uh, you definitely take it more seriously than other people like me. I actually, I mean, there was a time when I was very interested in, in fact, I still want to go out and do more experiments, more testing, because I want to understand the conditions of the atmosphere and how it actually contributes to the quote unquote evidence. Because I mean, I'm in Boise, Idaho, so it's going to be hard for me to look. We're about 3,400 square feet, or maybe 3,000 square feet elevation, and so when I'm looking at things, it might be different than what you're looking through. Probably closer to sea level, right?
I'm pretty close to sea level. Yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of thing, I just question a lot of the variables. There's just a lot of things to consider. And whenever I hear people making a lot of claims, I feel like, uh, a lot of people just say, I have the key to everything. And, you know, the, and, I just feel like people are willing, and I appreciate that you say that I can't prove necessarily, but I feel like I have some good information to present. And that means you're humble enough to consider that, there's other ways to interpret things. Now, I think that maybe you have a little bit of an edge on most people from people that I've talked to, because, and again, I have a mixed amount of people here that are from one side or from the other. So I'm not like, I just think it's going to be great that one day, it's not going to be so taboo to have this discussion. Now, but I don't know if you're feeling that way, because I went over to your channel and it seems like most of the videos that you have are basically debunk videos. And is that right? Or
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, if I found a flat Earth argument that I agreed with, I would post a video about, hey, there's this compelling evidence that I can't work into the globe model. Unfortunately, like I said, or like you may have seen from my videos, a lot of flat Earth arguments, either against the globe or for a flat Earth, are based on bad information, bad assumptions, bad math. Rob Skiba's, I'm very sorry he passed away, but like the magnifying glass thing that he sold on his website,
yeah,
and I guess they still
yeah,
sell, to show like you can make the sun set with refraction. I have a video explaining how he's using the wrong part of the magnifying glass. And so the magnifying glass that he's using requires light to go up like this to your eye. And in order for light to go up like this to your eye on Earth, you need an inverted density gradient in the atmosphere. And that's simply not what we have on a regular basis. You would need that to happen every time the sun rises or sets. You would need that to happen every time the moon rises or sets. The video of the Chicago skyline that he's using in his video, where they use a magnifying glass to make the skyline appear to rise up, the magnifying glass that they use the top half of the magnifying glass. And you know why they use the top half? Because the top half of the magnifying glass refracts light down, making the object appear higher. His video, he uses the bottom half of a magnifying glass, which makes light refract upward, which causes the image to appear lower. That's the sort of thing that I find. I find poorly done experiments, or I find people making incorrect claims. Like, let's see, John the Morgile
yeah.
often will do videos about how in the heliocentric model it should be impossible to see Venus after sunset. And he's using a terribly not drawn to scale diagram. And I will admit 100% on his diagram, it's impossible for you to see Venus after sunset. But his diagram isn't an accurate representation of the heliocentric model. So he's creating a straw man and arguing that. And it's...
Yeah. I understand what you're saying about straw man. So I don't like to use straw man either to prove anything, obviously, because obviously it's a straw man. But so again, there's a lot of assumptions going into a lot of these things that are, you know, like. So when you were talking about Rob Skiba's, because I really appreciated that video when he came to the realization that there was magnification happening, when he was actually seeing that building, it looked bigger in proportion to the boat that he was zooming in on from the shore of Lake Michigan, and it looked like the refracting effect actually causes the lensing effect, which magnifies it. And but again, I don't think that that piece of plastic that has the magnification, I don't think that that's the same effect that happens every time. It's going to be variables. There's going to be variables that change based on the conditions of the atmosphere. But it's interesting to me. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, yeah, so Rob Skiba has that thing where he shows the sun getting lower but staying the same size. Well, but then you have another flat Earth video saying that the sun actually does get smaller as it sets. like, so which is it? Now you have
I've
two
heard
competing
both.
flat Earth arguments.
I've heard both. So like so you know when he was showing that the building's magnified, who's to say the sun can't be magnified and look bigger? Or maybe it's in proportion to the view of how we actually can see it. When it's going away, maybe it's actually being magnified as it's getting further. So maybe it
And so
looks
then
about
again,
this.
you need an atmosphere and a dome or whatever that just so happens to refract the light from the sun and magnify it so it always appears the same size.
Well,
When
that
you
I
watch the
mean,
sunset through a solar filter, you will see that the sun barely changes size. It goes from circular to slightly squished, and then it sets below the horizon. You don't see it fading into a dot like that one YouTube video about the sun apparently fading into a dot over the desert.
yeah.
That
I
was
mean,
the glare. That wasn't the sun.
I saw those videos before, and I'm like, I've never seen the sun get smaller, so I got to do my own test. But I kind of wonder if, like, when you're saying it was from the desert, you know, what if the conditions when it's dry and not as humid, uh, you could see less lensing effect. You know, like for the area that I'm in, I'm kind of higher up in the hills, and and I just everything kind of looks like it's going downhill from where I'm at. So when I'm watching the sun, like say if I get up on Table Rock, which is uh, it's about 1,000 feet above you know the elevation where we're at. So Table Rock actually is kind of overlooking our city. So a lot of people go there to you know it's a lookout point, right? And you can see everything in the whole area. You're like Table Rock. It's pretty, and you can see the cross up on the hill, kind of thing. So Table Rock, I was thinking about going up there to kind of. I always notice that the sun kind of turns as it's going away. So it not only does it go down, but it's kind of turning on the horizon. Uh, and I mean, I love this topic. I love, you know, whether the Earth is flat or globe or whatever. I actually love to see kind of how everything kind of looks um, as it works, and but it makes it easier to investigate when I know that there's discrepancies in how people interpret it. So I still to this day am trying to figure out um, what the correct interpretation is. So yes, I'm glad that I'm talking to somebody that and you know has been investigating and studying the stars because I don't really study the stars. I really don't. You know, a lot of people will bring those images when they zoom in with a P900, and you can see all the electrical. You know, or it looks like it's you're looking through a water.
When you look at a
Uh,
star out of focus through a P9000, yes.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, sometimes it doesn't look out of focus, but again, I don't know. How do you know it's out of focus? Um,
Uh, what I would say is we have good reason to believe that the stars are further away than the moon. And we can say that because we can watch the dark part of the moon go in front of a star and obscure its light.
yeah,
And so we can say with some reasonable expectation that the stars are further away than the moon. So with whatever camera or telescope or whatever you are using, look at the moon and get the moon in focus, and then look at the star. You don't want your focus to be closer than the moon. You want your focus to be further away than the moon. So
yeah,
I would be willing to bet that the people who are doing this with their cameras are putting their cameras not on in range of infinity, but of range of, I don't know, like 5 meters or 10 meters or whatever. And of course, you're going to get stars looking wonky because you're seeing the star through the Earth's atmosphere. And when you see stars with your normal eyes, you see them twinkle. And the reason they
yeah,
twinkle is they're so far away that they are essentially points of light, and the light coming from them is getting wiggled by our atmosphere. Um, so when you take that out of focus, you get this weird effect. Um, if you were to if you were to if you were to use like a telescope to look at stars from a significantly high elevation, like say 1 or 2 miles above sea level, you would see that the stars twinkle an awful lot less, because already at 1 or 2 miles above sea level, you are above a considerably thick part of the Earth's atmosphere. That's why a lot of the big observatories are located on the tops of mountains, because they're above the densest part of the Earth's atmosphere, and they can observe the things in the sky with as little refraction as possible.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, my brain is starting to turn into mush. I think a lot of these other people in the chatters, I haven't really been following everything that everybody's talking about, but I appreciate everybody in the chat kind of going back and forth or whatever. But so long story short, I don't think I've concluded on anything differently than where I'm at now. But again, I'm very excited that we could have this discussion, and I'm willing to even have further discussions with you. And I'm actually questioning if you're open to talking to David Weiss, because I could probably line up a discussion like that if you're open to it.
If he could speak to me without insulting me, because as you've seen, I haven't insulted you. If he could speak to me calmly and politely, I would be happy to speak with him. I could rattle off the fact that I know that the Earth spins 1,037 miles per hour at the equator, that the Earth moves at 66,705 miles per hour, that the solar system moves 448,000 miles per hour. I can rattle off all of the numbers that he thinks that people like me don't know. But that's not really what matters. What matter are observations and the interpretation of the data from those observations.
Yeah, that's the key. Now, without me doing a further investigation of what you've actually, what you're familiar with, like the parallax and I don't have a telescope. I have a Sony camcorder that zooms like 40 times. I don't know if that it's not even as strong as like a P900 or whatever, but I don't know. I just I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate your perspective. I appreciate Dave's perspective. I've heard enough of the discussions he's had, where I don't think he ever tries to insult anybody. But if people start getting elevated with him, like, oh, come on, man, or start getting on his case about it, he might tend to get elevated too. But for the most part, he's pretty respectful, from what I can tell. And I just don't hear very many good discussions with globe believers or globe interpreters, whatever you want to call it. So you're open to it. I'll see if he's interested, but anyways, it looks like you're interacting with the people in the chat. I'm not very good at multitasking, so. But again, I appreciate you coming on. I think we're going to wrap it up here, and we're coming up on 5 minutes to the 2-hour mark. And I mean, let me just give my little 2 cents real quick, and then you can give your 2 cents. I just feel like it's interesting that most of the plane, not necessarily the flights, but a lot of the literature that's written by the military and NASA, a lot of the stuff that they put out there is based on a flat Earth perspective. I thought that was interesting. A lot of stuff that some Russian documents that I saw that Rob Skiba put out. I thought that was interesting that a lot of those were. I know you probably want to comment on that too, but But again, there's a lot of things that bring into question, the perspective that I was raised into, and I'm just on a journey to try to figure it out. And as of right now, I just feel like there's enough stuff out there that causes me to scratch my head. So I got to look into it a little deeper. Um, Hold on, I got to say hi to Eric. Thanks. Hey, Eric, it's nice to see you, man. Gypsy Road, his channel has freaking exploded since I first talked to him. He has like 20,000 followers or something now. But anyways, I don't know. Give me your final 2 cents, and then we can call it a night.
So I guess I have to start by talking about these NASA and other documents that mention a flat, documents about like models of aircraft that say we're going to assume a flat and non-rotating Earth. Those documents also assume that the plane is a rigid body, and the plane is not a rigid body. They assume that the plane never changes mass. The plane does change mass because it's burning fuel, so it's losing mass. They will often assume no wind, which is also not the case. These documents make assumptions, and flat earthers only look at the one that says we assume a flat and non-rotating Earth, and they ignore all the others, which are assumptions that are actually false. Planes are not rigid bodies. Planes are not constant mass. Planes do not have perfect symmetry. So the reason you make those assumptions in a document like this is so that it's easier to do the math. But the math is for a model. The math is not going to work in every situation. So that is my response to what you said. My final 2 cents is I'll be completely honest. I've blocked a number of people in your chat because they're not speaking to me with the same politeness and courtesy that you have. I would like to thank Cookies. I have no idea who Cookies is, but I would like to thank Cookies
I've never
for
seen him
their
before. Sorry.
polite attitude. Mojo Shop, Matthew, somebody, and Liberty Returns. Liberty Returns told me that I should listen to my senses and not other men. So I agree. I should not listen to Liberty or Matthew. They were rude to me, and I generally don't make time for people who are rude to me. Maria Walker is asking how planes are not rigid bodies. If you've ever taken an airplane ride, you'll notice that the wings tend to go whoop, whoop, especially when you're going through turbulence. Planes are not rigid bodies. If they were rigid bodies, the wings would snap off of a plane when you encounter turbulence. So I would just like to say thank you, Charlie. You have been a very gracious host. You did not need to invite me on. I thank you very much for your time. I thank you for sticking to my time limit. Is it almost exactly 1 a.m.? And I would just like to say that the things that I emailed you about, like those observations, you will have to take my word for them until you do them yourself. And you don't want to take me as an authority. So I strongly recommend, but the body is rigid. Maria, you'll have to look up what rigid body means in physics. You'd actually need to do the observations that I talk about to come to an understanding. I'd be happy to talk to you again sometime. I'm not going to do 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. every time.
I know, man. You're probably fried now.
Yeah, and I have work in the morning and a 2-year-old, so good for me. So thank you again. Thank you for your graciousness.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, have a good night, and I'll keep in touch with you via email. We'll chat. I'll send you videos. You can send me videos, whatever. I'm not really good at like breaking down conversation over email. It's easier for me just to have a talk or send a video. But again, I have 2 young kids too, so I get it. So, all right, man. Well, have a good night, and we'll chat again. You know, maybe we'll have a panel of people. We can have a more vast discussion about, other topics or whatever. So, and it's hard to unpack, more than what we've done in 2 hours, but we can revisit this. So, Jeff, until next time, have a great night, man.
Thank you. You too.
All right, bye.